And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to Life Mastery with Todd Allen, the talk radio show that dives into the science of higher consciousness. Join Todd and his guests weekly at 10 a.m. Pacific Time and learn how to live a peaceful life with intentional mastery. Enjoy a survey of inspiring topics such as abundance, intention, health, manifestation, love, and transformation. It's all right here. Leading authors, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs with stories and messages to support your well-being, let alone your most evocative of dreams.
Hey, it's another group. Oh, the music's still playing. Wait a sec. Hey, it's another groovy day, and that's because I make it that way. I almost got it, Jackie. I almost got the Facebook Live shared before the show actually started.
Before you had to do it.
I want to welcome everyone to Life Mastery Radio, the talk show that brings you great thoughts and ideas for you to use on your very own life mastery journey. And you can probably hear my dog coughing in the background. I know she has congestive heart failure, and the heart is so swollen it's blocking her airway a little bit. But she's doing good. She's still the same dog. She just has coughing fits. So if you hear that, it's not me in the background or something weird. It's just my dog. She's doing really good. Before we get started, let's just take a minute and get ourselves centered and situated. And I want you to think about what it is that you're grateful for. What is it that brings you peace, happiness? What things do you have that you're grateful for? And just focus on those for a minute. And let's take in a deep breath. And as that breath, as you bring in that, let that breath let all that gratitude flow through you into the universe, through your heart center, through your chest, right out your speaker. Let's do one more time. And this time, action you can do those dreams, visions, and goals that you aspire to. Those things that really give energy. Both those things will energy.
Well, it looks like we lost Todd. He was somewhat robotic. So welcome to Life Mastery Radio with Todd and Jackie. And I'm the Jackie and the Todd and Jackie. And I am delighted today. We have a wonderful guest. And Dr. Bernie Siegel is someone who absolutely made a difference in my life. And here comes Todd back.
I'm back.
You were
going, Jackie. Wait, I got to tell you this. Because this is too funny. I'm getting ready for the show today, and I thought, since Bernie Siegel is one of Jackie's all-time heroes, I should let her open up the show. I'm not kidding. Bernie, that came right from my heart, and look what happened.
Manifesting.
I learned these two words from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. There are no coincidences.
Exactly.
And Jung said it in this way, because she really converted me into what I call the Jungian surgeon. He said the future is unconsciously prepared long in advance and therefore can be guessed by clairvoyance. So, I find this so true in my life. It's just amazing, the things that happen to me. And somebody shows up to solve a problem or to give you information or whatever it is.
We're going to talk about that. Jackie, were you done introducing Bernie?
Well, I don't have an official introduction in front of me. I assume
right from the heart. We want to hear it right from the heart.
No, well, if you want me to, I'll do it, but I don't know all of his credentials, which he probably is due.
For many, Jackie, Bernie needs no introduction. I think.
Okay.
Well, you only have to say, here's Bernie.
Yeah. Here's Bernie. Well, let me tell you this, Bernie, because I want you to know how important you have been to me. Because when your first book came out, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, I was in the process of starting to heal from childhood sexual abuse. And I think your book was recommended to me by the counselor I was seeing at the time. And this was probably the first self-help book that I'd ever read. And I don't even know that you categorize it as self-help, but it was for me life-changing, because as I read about some of your patients and the physical ailments they had because of their mindset, because of some of their life experiences, that I distinctly remember one story about a man who had stomach cancer, and it was discovered through your conversations with him that he had a hard time just telling people that he loved them. He couldn't tell his wife or his children that he loved them. He had kind of alienated himself from the family to some degree. And that when he healed enough that he was able to do that, was actually to verbalize his feelings, his cancer went away. And the first book is full of stories like that. And it was so impactful on me that it helped me to heal. It helped me to recognize that for the first time, I could literally affect, through my thoughts and through my attitude, I could affect my physical health. I could affect my ability to heal from my own abusive experiences through my mindset. Right. And that was the first introduction I had to even that possibility. And it is something that I have gone back to year after year, time and again. And recently, a couple of years back, when my own mother had Alzheimer's, I thought about your ideas again, and it made so much sense to me, because let me tell you, my mother was not a nice person. She was selfish. She'd made a lot of enemies in her life. She was not a good parent. And for her to develop Alzheimer's and forget all of that was so appropriate. And when I went to visit her during her latter few years, she didn't know who I was, but she was the nicest person. I mean, it was so different from who she actually was. And I thought, this is what she needed. This is how she needed her life to end, is in a happy way, and to forget all of the sadness and the bad experiences that she'd had. And so for me, right. Alzheimer's was a blessing. It was a blessing because she didn't have to remember all those bad things any longer.
A simple way to help people when they have a problem is to say to them, what words would you use to describe what you're experiencing? Failure, roadblock, pressure, wake-up call. I mean, some will have disasters and say it's been a new beginning. Right. But when they would come up with a negative word, I'd say, what else in your life fits that word? And people would go, wow, thank you, and walk out of the office. It's like they knew what they needed to change. I mean, one of the funniest ones was, I was in the emergency room. This woman was in severe pain from migraine headaches. I happened to be there, so I wanted to help her. So I went in and I did a meditation with her. She was waiting to be admitted to the hospital. And I said, you know, what does the pain feel like? Pressure. I said, all right, let's work on relieving the pressure in your life. She wasn't my patient, see, so I didn't say what's going on in your life that's causing your pressure. So I used different words to get to that. And then I left her. 15 minutes later, the nurse saw me and said, oh, it's her marriage. Her headache's gone. She's going home. That impressed me. And I've used it in my life when I've had physical symptoms. years ago, I had vertigo. And I thought, hey, stupid, why don't you do what you tell patients? What's it like to, everything's dizzy. And I said, well, the world is spinning around. And said, yeah, you're doing too many damn things. You're going everywhere. So you got a wonderful symptom. It makes you rest and lie down. And as soon as I got that, I understood myself. Then you don't have problems anymore. Myself. And one other mention was the word failure. And the woman said, well, my body failed me. I have cancer. I said, that's not my question. What in your life fits the word failure? And she said, my parents committed suicide when I was a child. I must have been a failure as a child.
Mm.
And that's why that simple statement would get people started on their therapy and understand. And yet other doctors would say, oh, you're blaming your patients for being sick. What's wrong with you? I have the word controversial as the head title of almost every interview I've had, way back in the 1990s. And I said, I'm not blaming them. I'm trying to get them to understand why they got sick.
Yeah.
Now, the Monday morning, we literally have more heart attacks, strokes, suicides, and illnesses.
Right.
If you love your life, Monday's not an issue. But if you don't, it sure is. So
I'm curious, Bernie, you said something. When did you discover the power of meditation? I mean, was that early on in your career as a doctor? Because you mentioned that you used it.
That did it. I would give Elizabeth Kubler-Ross probably most of the credit, because the suicide rate in doctors is higher than the average population, okay? I never considered suicide, but I was in pain. People you can't cure, children who are born with deformities and need surgery. What kind of God made this world? So faith was something, that's a whole other issue in my life.
Right.
Faith was something really important for me to begin to look into. And it was because of a past life I experienced and all kinds of things. I went for therapy and was helped to understand what I needed to look into and know. Now, what was your question again? Because I get started.
Oh, about meditation.
Yeah.
I was just curious when you
operating room, that's where it convinced me. See, I think at Elizabeth's workshop, we did guided imagery and meditation, and other workshops I went to. I grew up as an artist, portrait painter, but I didn't believe in all this stuff. So when you're at a workshop and they say, we're going to do a meditation, a guided imagery, I thought, oh, yeah, what a waste of time. And one time, which is what taught me the lesson, I was sitting there with my eyes open, staring up at the doctor who was running the workshop and doing the meditation. And I wasn't doing it because it's stupid. And then he looked at me and I thought, oh God, he knows I'm not doing it. So I shut my eyes. And then it started happening. I mean, all these things I saw, I thought, this is amazing. So I went back to the office and did it with my patients. And the most interesting was doing it in the operating room. I played music and talked to people while I was operating. And the anesthesiologist would say, what's wrong with you? They're anesthetized. Why? I said, they can hear me.
Yeah.
We know that now. It's not different than when you go to sleep, an alarm clock wakes you up. I mean, your brain may be sleeping in the operating room, but it hears what's going on. So I played music, I talked to patients, and it was amazing the response you'd get. I mean, even immediately, because we have monitors, I would play games and say, I want your pulse to be 83. And the pulse would go to 83 on the monitor.
That was pretty bold and unconventional back then.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
I mean, I have to say, you'd probably call me a little bit crazy, but I felt secure. What do I have to lose? You're doing it, okay? I'm a well-trained surgeon. People know that. If he's a little crazy, fine. But then everybody enjoyed working with me. Oh, what's interesting, Brian Weiss, because my recent book, 3 Men, 6 Lives, he commented on about past lives. He was a student at Yale going into psychiatry. Years later, I meet him. He said, Bernie, I was a student at Yale. I always chose to be in the operating room with you when I was on the surgical rotation, because you're not a normal surgeon. And that, to me, was such a compliment that somebody who's going to be a psychiatrist wants to be in the operating room with me because they see the things I did. I mean, one sort of off, the mark story, but you'll understand it, the power of the mind. My mother-in-law in her 80s developed a hernia from helping her paralyzed husband. He had a spinal cord injury from a fall. So I said, we'll get you to the hospital. We can do it as an outpatient, etc. We set it up and she's there. Now, she was an opera singer, an incredibly proper person. I mean, if you didn't sing the right note, it was a disaster.
She knew it, yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't understand her till I heard other opera singers talking, because I used to wonder, why is she so obsessive about everything? But it was like everything in her life was part of the opera. So we operate and we're done. And I thought, what can I say to her so she will be so embarrassed, she'll just get up and go home with no pain. So at the top of my lungs, so everybody could hear me, I said, now remember this, no sex for 6 weeks after surgery. And then I went to get dressed and they took her to the recovery room. I got my clothes on. I come out to the recovery room to check on her. I look around, there's no mother-in-law. I said, where's my mother-in-law? The nurse said, she came out, refused pain medication, asked for her clothes and went home. And I thought, you did a perfect job. I embarrassed her and she knows her son-in-law. So she just got out of there and went home and had no trouble recovering from surgery. And I mean, ultimately, we loved each other, believe me, we loved each other. Because even, see, again, mystical things. It was just, God knows how many years ago, but she died on the Jewish holiday Yom Kippur.
Mm.
I was at services. I saw a cloud like the size of a pillow come into the synagogue from the door. And I watched it. It moved across the room, paused over me, and I heard my mother-in-law say, goodbye, Bernie. And then it went out. And I jumped up, got in my car and drove to the nursing home that she was in. I walk in the door, nurse sees me coming. Oh, you've heard. I said, I didn't hear, I knew. She had died like 15 minutes ago. Yeah. Wow. But the two of us were real buddies. And I think that's why she came to say goodbye, that we had fun together. But you see, those are the things that changed me.
Right.
I can't deny that those things happened. Oh, and then one of my patients was a mystic. And she came in the office one day and said, I've learned you're not a normal doctor. So I brought some messages from the dead for you. She said, I was at a meeting with other mystics. I said, let's see if there's anything for Dr. Siegel. And sure enough, she gives me the name of a person, Frank, and what he said. And I called his wife because I knew who it was. He had just died a couple of weeks ago. And his wife screamed. I said, I didn't do this to upset you. I told you I won't say anything if you don't want to hear it. She said, you're not upsetting me. That's exactly what Frank said every time he left your meeting. Mm. What it was, I can't buy the package, what I was preaching and teaching. He said, I can't buy the package. But he also said, if I known it was this easy, I would have like accepted a long time ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, Bernie, do you feel that you've always had this observant spirit or observant attitude toward life, or is it something that you developed
I
because of
think
an
again, it's
experience?
how you brought up. You know, you talked about that yourself. I was brought up with love, and because of what both of my parents went through. I mean, my father's father dying of tuberculosis, leaving a family with nothing. And he said, oh, it taught him what was important about life. So he was the sweetest, gentlest man you ever want to meet.
Yeah.
My mother and her parents and siblings escaped from Russia because the Cossacks were trying to kill the Jews, and they were lucky enough to get out of there. So they were all coming from a place of love and kindness to people. And so that's what I grew up with. Do what makes you happy. God is redirecting you. Something good will come of this. I mean, you weren't allowed to have trouble, and you were here to help other people. And
Were you an only child?
no, I had a sister who drove me nuts. The little devil. And I had to take care of her because I was almost 5 years older. When I say take care of her, I had to get her to school and things like that. And literally in those days, I mean, today they probably would have arrested my parents, but they tied her to the house, to a drain pipe so that she couldn't get past the end of the driveway into the street and drive other kids crazy, because the kids were afraid of her. If they saw her loose, they'd run past the house. She just scared them. You know what I mean? She didn't hurt anybody. And she was a bright kid, but getting her to school when she would tease me, I'm trying to keep her from getting hit by a car, passing busy streets, and she'd drive me nuts. And
See, in today's world, Bernie, they would medicate somebody like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. She was just so bright.
Yeah.
Everybody knew, you know, these were things she was making up and doing.
Is
Oh,
she
yeah.
still living?
So pretty. I got to add this to you. It drove me nuts. She was a blonde, really cute. And I'd be walking down the hall at school, and the teacher would stop me. You're so lucky. I'd say, what are you talking about? I'm lucky. What a lovely sister you have. She's pretty and bright, lovely clothes. Oh, you're so lucky. And I would think, take her home for a week. See what you think then.
Is she still living, your sister?
Oh, she died. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, she lost one of her children and then her husband. And I think that, you know, that participated, like you're saying, what, you know, in her turning off the switch and going.
Yeah.
So,
Huh.
Bernie, I'm curious, if we look back, what made you become a surgeon? Was that something that you always wanted to do, or?
When I was thinking about what do I want to do, I thought, well, you could be an artist. And then I thought, I didn't know anything about the art world. See, I made drawings, but I never went to a museum. I didn't know about a Picasso or a Rembrandt. I mean, those are things that were totally out of my life. And I thought, well, I could be a decorator. And I thought, what the hell do you want to be a decorator? That's not something. You could be a surgeon and then use your hands to help people. And that really was what clicked in my mind. You like people, science is interesting, you like to use your hands and fix things. And I said, yeah, that'll make it all happen. But then you become a surgeon and you learn you can't fix everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I say the faith issue, you really begin to question, what's the matter with God? Why did he do this? I can remember, I also shaved my head in the 1970s, which was one more thing to embarrass our family because the kids had their hair down to their shoulders and the father was shaving his head. But I came across again an article by Jung many years later. It said, monks shaved their head to uncover their spirituality. I read that, I knew. Because Elizabeth, I keep talking about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, but one of her questions to me, I drew a picture for her. Bernie, what are you covering up? What do you ask me that for? You used a white crayon on a white piece of paper. You added a layer. See? Then she said, why is 11 important? Why are you asking that? You made 11 trees. I mean, and I had an answer to everything.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, what changed me was that experience. So I went back to the hospital with crayons and literally would tell people in the emergency room, patients in the office, and draw a picture of your treatment, draw a picture of yourself, and it was amazing. See, I didn't know any of this. So I was learning from their drawings.
Yeah.
It proved to me this is real. Then when I found out, other therapists had written books about all this, but they weren't surgeons. You see, if you're an art therapist, you don't know that somebody just drew a picture of their anatomy on the page, whether it's a tree or a boat or, something. And that became fascinating at the hospital. See, that's when you go from, that crazy Siegel. Hey, that's interesting. Because other doctors could see. Yeah. Let me give you a simple example, because in outpatient surgery, they made a coloring book for kids because I was doing so much surgery and I would have them draw pictures ahead of time and they all saw how interesting it was. So they actually made up a little booklet, where you come in and you see the operating room and your parents are waiting to take you home, a whole series. And one kid literally drew a picture of the operating room she'd never been in.
Wow.
The number of lights, the number of people, the colors of the drapes, all this is there. And that is what affected people. But this one child, when I came, the anesthesiologist said, Bernie, we got a problem here. I said, what is it? On the front page, it said, you'll meet an anesthesiologist. That's someone dressed in what looks like green pajamas. He said he drew me in red. I said, yeah, he knows there's danger from the anesthesia. He said, Bernie, yes, his mother has muscular dystrophy. And if he has a genetic abnormality because of that, he could have a very adverse reaction to muscle relaxants, could even threaten his life. I said, then look at the last page. If he draws himself purple, spiritual color, I'll just cancel the operation, send him home. And the last page was just the black and the red. I'm not happy, I'm hurting, and that sort of thing.
Wow.
And, but that's the part, you see, that impressed people when they would see that kind of thing. And again, if somebody drew the devil giving them poison, I'd say, then don't go get chemotherapy. Or change your image of it. See yourself going, getting it, no side effects, doing beautifully. Do that for a couple of weeks, then go. See? But if you're going to say it's the devil giving you poison, you'll have every side effect in the book. And then other people drew the same thing as coming from God.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting.
A beautiful yellow stream coming into their vein from God. And you don't worry about those people.
Yeah.
And again, I say that's what impressed physicians, because they couldn't deny what the patients were revealing to them. Right.
So you've written so many books with these wonderful stories and examples of how we can control, our destiny, so to speak. And so why did you decide now to write the latest book, which is
saying about your childhood and so forth? I mean, I began to realize how our childhood is stored up in our bodies. And some of the most emotional stories for me were youngsters coming in. Let me, if I can have a minute, tell you three of them.
Please do.
One is on my answering machine. Dr. Siegel, you have Jack Kevorkian's phone number. I want to be dead. I called her up. I said, what is it? My father sexually abused me. I have a brain tumor. I want to be dead. I said, Becky, you're a child of God, and I'll be your new father. I'll be your CD. And I always look to the side because I must have 20 cards from her now. I keep in front of it, Happy Father's Day, my bonus dad.
Nice.
Because in the office, a suicidal kid said to me, "You're my CD." I said, what are you talking about? I'm a CD. You're my chosen dad. That's what I started telling people when they were suicidal. And I said to Becky, "I'll be your new father." Now she's alive today, decades later, wishing I could come back to Texas to visit with her again. Because we, when I would travel, if I was in Texas, I'd make sure of going to see Becky. But she's alive today and feels loved and is giving me so much love. Then that kid who said, "You're my CD." And then another boy who was sexually abused. He wrote a book about it, A Rock in a Hard Place. But he called me one day. "I'm going to commit suicide," because I was trying to help him. I said, "Tony, what are you talking about?" He said, "I'm going to commit suicide. I can't take this anymore." I mean, he had to give sexual pleasures to people. Literally, his bedroom was like a bare room where you'd lay down on the floor to sleep. "Oh, you want a blanket? Then you got to do a favor." That kind of. So he said, "I'm going to commit suicide." I said, "Look, the other kids aren't committing suicide. They're killing their parents. So I know people in New York. I have mafia friends. I'll get you a gun and we'll kill your parents." I mean, I wasn't kidding around with him, talking. And he said, "No, I never want to be like them." Boy, that hit me in the heart.
Yeah.
What a sweet kid.
Wow.
And think of all the violence today.
Yeah.
And what he said. So he said, "All right, goodbye. I'm going down to the A train to jump in front of this subway, train and commit suicide." And he hangs up the phone. A few hours later, the phone rings. I pick it up. "Hello, Dr. Siegel." "Tony, I thought you were going to commit suicide. The train didn't show up." And I couldn't stand waiting there. So I called the suicide prevention hotline that was posted in the station. And they came and rescued me and are teaching me about love. You say no coincidences.
Love really is the answer to all. And earlier, Doc or Bernie, we were talking about grandmothers. You were telling us the story about your grandmother that.
Oh, yeah.
And what hit me was
grandmother.
Grandmother.
Yeah, she learned from her experience.
What hit me was in today's world, maybe we should just release all the grandmothers on everybody and see if we can't fix it.
Well, I think there should be parenting as part of your education in schools and other places, because when studies are done, did your parents love you? No. These were Harvard students. You look them up 35 years later, 98% had suffered a major illness.
Yeah.
Did your parents love you? Yes. You look them up 30, 35 years later when they were middle-aged, and 24% had suffered a major illness. Realize growing up with love, you take care of yourself. I always say the message I would give the world is, "Ma, I had a terrible day at school. I'm not sure what to do. I have to make a decision. Do what makes you happy." "Ma, I wanted you to help me decide." "Do what makes you happy." And I couldn't get her to help me decide. It was do what makes you happy. Then the next time, "Ma, everything went wrong at school today. It was just a horror." "God is redirecting you. Something good will come of this." "Ma, you're listening to me? I had a horrible day. God is redirecting you. Something good will come." I would go to my bedroom and say, "God, my mother is no help." I always would shut the door because I thought if people came in and said, "What are you doing?" and I said, "I'm talking to God," they'd say, "You need a psychiatrist." Yeah. And the third thing was my father, who went through hell, their family, because no finances, nothing, and his father died. I remember multiple things about him, but when I would need him to help me, I'd say, you know, I'm feeling guilty to ask you for help. He said, if I don't want to do it, I'll say no. But he said, one of the best things that ever happened to me was my father dying when I was 11 years old. I said, what are you talking about? You went through hell. He said, yeah, but it taught me what was important about life. And he never spanked his children because you knew if you were upsetting him, that was worse than being spanked.
Yeah.
He was such a sweet, gentle man. And when I broke a neighbor's toy, because I was jealous of the kid and what he had, his parents came over and told my parents, your son broke this toy of our son. And they didn't yell at me. They didn't say a word. And they said, okay, we'll replace it. Next day, my father comes home from work with the toy in his hands. What do you think he did with it?
Told you to take it over there.
Yeah. He said, even worse, he said, here, I knew you wanted one of these. I took it, but I still remember the pressure on my head because I thought he would let me keep it. That was him. That, you know, he would never yell at me or spank me that you did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I felt that pressure. If I keep it, my head will explode. I know it's the right thing to do. So I took it over to the neighbor and gave it to them. But I always say that kind of parenting was so powerful.
Right.
You know, and my wife and I have 5 children, including twins, and it was a house full. And I wasn't as calm as my father because one of them would say to me, you're getting a divorce. I said, what are you asking that for? Well, you yell a lot. I said, when I don't like what you're doing, yeah, I yell to get you to listen and stop. But I love you and I love your mother. Why'd you ask that? Oh, the neighbors are getting divorced and they yelled a lot. In our house, and we didn't know it, but the twins were born with hearing impairment due to German measles that my wife was exposed to.
Oh, wow.
Even noisier because they would turn up the television while the others were watching it, but they couldn't hear it. So then they'd start yelling at each other and, you know, yeah. And well, I learned a lot from having 5 children.
Well,
my wife was a teacher, kindergarten teacher. So she was better at managing and knowing than I was.
Especially with kids, right? Let's talk a little bit about this new book. This is your 19th book. And you call it a non-fiction fiction. Did I get that right?
Non-fiction novel.
A non-fiction novel.
Non-fiction.
And from the looks of it, you took stories that you have been experienced or told to, and you put them in a story that revolves around this doctor. And I assumed, and then you told me that this doctor was you.
What? Well, no, the 3 people in the story, so people know, a mafia don. All the names are real too. Those people. Carmine and I grew up in Brooklyn, and so there was Carmine Berzimato, the mafia don, Jonathan Hochma, the psychiatrist, and George Dingfelder, the surgeon. And they all come together because the 2 of them are seeking psychiatric help.
Right.
The psychiatrist, see, my past life experience is in there and my reality. I'll mention it in a minute. But the psychiatrist goes to a conference and they do a past life session, Brian Weiss, and he felt like I did about meditations. Oh, this is nonsense. I didn't come here, for this.
Right.
But he sits there and has this incredible experience about his past life in which, because of his actions, it leads to the death of many people, both accidents, suicides, all kinds of things. And he realizes that's what led him to be a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
to help these things.
Hmm.
He also, as I have realized, finds things that, see, a boy goes to the cemetery and commits suicide at his father's grave. And he had a part in his father dying in an accident because of things he had done. And the psychiatrist, to make a long story short, is taking a walk, goes by this cemetery and sees the stones of the boy from his past life
Oh, wow.
with chips on it from the shotgun that he killed himself with. So, and even just so you know, interesting things, they're out at the Menninger Clinic having a meeting, psychiatric place. And in his past life, his mother was told to take her son to see Dr. Carl. And he asks, is there anybody here named Dr. Carl, or was there? And he learns, we don't call them by their first name. There are many Menningers here. It's Dr. Carl Menninger, but we call him Dr. Carl so he won't get confused with, if you said Dr. Menninger, it's like, who are you talking about?
Yeah.
So all these things that were part of his past life, he realizes were true and real. And that's part of, in a sense, what happened to me. I was a knight. I know I was Irish. And I've had things in my life that have connected me with Ireland. One was a boy being named after me, but the family said, we're Irish, so his name is Brady. Now, the mother, talk about meditation. She called me up and said, can you help me? I'm in premature labor. They tell me I'm going to have I'm going to abort the fetus. I went over to see her in the hospital. I said, look, we'll do a meditation. We'll communicate with your uterus. And we did. Send it love, slow it down, peaceful. And her labor stopped completely.
Wow.
She went on to have a full-term birth. And that's when the kid got named Brady after me. But those are things, you talk about meditation, that happened. Because the people were in that room. I screamed at them, get out of here. I knew they were causing her to abort now because they were all, tearful, depressed, doctors, nurses, family. I just screamed, get out of here. I scared them. So they all ran out of the room. And then I got her to quiet down and have that experience. Now, in my case, and this happened really when someone in a phone call said to me, when I learned, like I'm saying, I can't really talk to you. I have an interview I have to do. Barney, why are you living this life? That's exactly what she said. I said, oh my God. She said, what's the matter? I just saw myself with a sword in my hand, killing people and their pets. I said, maybe that's why I became a surgeon, to help people with the knife. And then we got into another discussion. But I always say to people, it's like watching yourself in a movie. I watched myself be told by my Lord. This is the way I told it to James Hillman, the Jungian therapist, because it was so much grief. I had to talk to somebody. So I went to him and I said, my Lord asked me to kill the neighbor's daughter because they're having conflict over the land in between. And I said, why don't I kill him? He said, no, I want you to kill her and teach him a lesson. What if I don't? I'll kill you. Okay, I'm going. I learned where the woman's room was, so I kill her at night, and it wouldn't hurt her so much. I go up to her room, quietly sneak in. I didn't know it, but she had a dog. The dog starts to growl, so I split the dog's head open with a sword, and it wakes her up. And when she turned to look at me, it was my wife. And I chopped her head off and then cried for hours. Now, where did this happen? When I was flying cross country on a plane without my wife with me. So I was off into this trance, sitting there for hours flying across country. And I couldn't stop crying and sobbing. And so I went for therapy. The other was when I brought the head back to my Lord, I said, look, you happy now? He said, I didn't do that. You did it.
Hmm.
And when I started telling this to Hillman, he said, Bernie, you hear what you're saying? What do you mean? You said, my Lord. I said, it's the Lord of the castle. He said, no, Bernie, it's your Lord. And I said to him, oh boy, that's been an issue for me. Faith has been an issue for me my whole life. And I don't mean my faith, but I meant, why would Abraham do what I wouldn't have done? God says, I want you to sacrifice your child. I would have said, take me, leave the kid alone. But I realized he had faith, and he ends up not losing his child. And I always used to picture myself as Jesus jumping off the cross to really impress the hell out of people. Show them what I'm capable of doing so they'll pay attention to me. Yeah.
Hmm.
And Hillman said, Bernie, go home and relive this. I said, okay. So I go home. My Lord says, kill the neighbor's daughter. I said, okay, I'm going. And he said, no, Bernie, I just needed to know you had faith in me. Bring them here so we can resolve this problem. And I go and I convince them I'll protect them and stand in front of them all the time. And the father said, I heard you talking to my daughter. I believe you will go. And what's the solution? Because this struck me years ago when I was reading a story. A man buys a farm. He's digging up the soil and he hits something. So he pulls it up. It's a box filled with the treasure, worth a lot. So he calls the guy. He said, hey, I found this. It's yours. No, it's yours. You bought the farm. It was yours. It was been here. It's yours. No, it's yours. And they're arguing. A friend hears them and says, look, you have a son, you have a daughter. Tell them to get married and give that to them as a wedding present. See?
It's a solution, right?
That's what my wife and I solved.
Hmm.
We met working at a day camp. She's first grade girls. I'm first grade boys. She's at the top running the group. I'm at the bottom. You know, this college student who's looking for a job. And one day we were standing at the pool. Why I say there are no coincidences, watching our kids. And I said to her, you know, it's really nice that the people who own the place, this was a day camp in Westchester. The people who run the place leave the pool open in the evening so we can come back and take a swim on a hot night. And she said, are you asking me for a date? And I wasn't. I was just saying it was a nice thing to have, you know, that available. But as soon as she said, are you asking me for a date? I said, yeah, of course.
Heck yeah, I am.
She's so attractive. I never would have asked her for a date because, I mean, who the hell will go out with me when you're that pretty? You don't need me. You know? But she said, okay. And of course, I learned something. She wasn't on time when I went to pick her up and never was on time. But that was the good part. So we went to some club that she knew and we sat there and talked for hours to each other. And that was the beginning. Oh, and her mother, you know, I mentioned was an opera singer. And that was funny too, because they had a piano in the living room. So I would sit there because my wife wasn't on time and I would play the piano and sing. And the mother-in-law would close every door and window in the house. And one night I said to her, why do you shut everything when I get here? She said, because I don't want the neighbors to have to suffer the way I do listening to you sing.
That's bad.
You're going to take my daughter out. You have to promise you will never sing in the house or the car. And I did. And again, the mystical part, when my wife died, I have this patient who was a mystic. I told you, brought me messages from the dead. I thought, let's see if I get a call from Monica, you know, because this would confirm the truth of it. And on Sunday morning, the phone rings. Hi, Bernie. Bobby's back with her folks again. Everything's fine, going very well. a lady who was an opera singer called me to tell me that she's back together with Bobby. Now, when you get a fact like that from a mystic, you know, you could lie and say, oh, she must have heard from somebody, your wife died.
Yeah.
This lovely lady who was an opera singer called me.
Yeah.
Those are the things. I get calls from Monica, and I tell my patients, if you want to get a message from your dead loved one, call Monica. And nobody has ever called me and said, Monica's crazy. I mean, every single person, you know, is touched by what she's able to tell them and connect them with.
Oh my goodness, Bernie, we only have about 5 minutes left, and I just have one last curious question. So what you've described for us is a magical life, no doubt about it, and I'm sure you would agree too.
Right.
What would be your best advice for people to be able to tune into that magical life too?
Well, it's part of why I wrote this last book. I mean, to know that there's more to you than yourself. And so to look at your talents, your desires, you know, and to become your true self. I saw a 5-year-old, well, he said when he was 5, he saw a violin and ran over and hugged it. Now, he was 9 at the time. He was on a television show going to play his violin in front of a concert orchestra. So I know what he's got in him is a violinist. And so that people should pay attention to their talents, their desires, you know, and in a positive way, use them. If it's something that wounded you in the past, okay, you know, then avoid that, resolve that. You know, if you didn't feel love, then choose to love. Because love is the answer. I even tell people to be a love warrior. Somebody's driving you crazy, say, I love you. And they don't know what to do with you. I have saved lives because of violent people on the streets by walking up to them. When everybody else is trying to get away, I walked over and said, I want you to know something. I love you. I'm sorry for whatever you're going through. I love you. And they have all walked away. One boy who was screaming and cursing because he was younger, I said, I want you to know I love you. I'm sorry your parents don't. He shut up, turned, and I'm sure headed home. And people come over and say, thank you. Oh my God, thank you. Because it's scary. And
I wonder how we get our politicians to do that.
It's why, I'll tell you, this is a big thing. You know, when you ask me about being a surgeon, you have to ask yourself, why are you a politician? When I say, draw yourself working as a doctor, over 90% of the kids in this medical school class drew themselves sitting behind a desk with a diploma on the wall, no patient in the room. Only one drew himself with his arm around a lady in a wheelchair, handing her a tissue. He's a real doctor.
Wow.
See, so I'd say, why are you a politician? My ego, you know, I want to impress people.
Power.
Things. Yeah. I mean, I know Trump was not brought up in a healthy way. You know, I mean, what's going to impress the world? A hotel with your name, you know, big bank account. Even his denial of letting his income taxes be reviewed. I mean, yeah. And so it's sad, but if we want to drive him nuts, that's why I wrote a letter to the editor that was published in USA Today when he first got elected. I said, what people need to do is go up to him and say, we love you.
Aw.
You know, what the hell he's going to do then? Yeah. But they're not doing it, see?
Yeah.
I hear it sometimes in his rallies. I think that's pretty
Oh,
bad.
yeah, but those are the people he thinks agree with him. See, when all the Democrats would say, we really love you.
Right.
How can he curse them? You know, they love me. How can I yell at them? Yeah.
Wow.
You could get more things out.
Thank you so much for being on the show again today, Bernie. We really enjoyed your stories, and your book is amazing. I want to encourage people to go and check it out.
Let me say this. Your reaction to the book tells what you're like.
Mm.
Thank you.
I'd say there are.
Well, let's
things-
ask Jackie. Jackie, what do you think of the book, Jackie?
I only read a little bit of it, so I can't really give an honest opinion quite yet. But I love the first part of it because there's a dog in it, so I love that.
Here we'll entice him.
Since I was like 5 years old, and I'm
Yeah.
sure because I killed the dog.
That one, yeah.
And let me, if you have 1 minute, there's a story named.
We're out of time, Bernie. You have to go.
Sorry.
Thank you again. I'm going to have you back on the show.
All right.
That's about all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. And lastly, please make it a great day, because it is all about choice. And
Right.
you heard that right from Bernie. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.